Welcome back to another episode of the 3'n'D podcast. We're your hosts, Rashab and Gabe. And it's always a fun time to do this week, especially with Kyrie coming off his 50-point game against Charlotte, the fifth of his career, actually. And earlier in the year, we had Chauncey Billups, the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, make a comment about Kyrie being the most skilled guard ever, the most skilled point guard ever in the NBA, in the history of the NBA. And currently, the point guard position in the NBA is actually the deepest it's ever been. We have a lot of talent up and down rosters at the point guard position. So I think a fun debate is always, who's the top five point guards in the league? I know I've made my list, you've made your list. It's never been a better time to have this discussion than it is now, just given the amount of talent that's in the NBA. So why don't we start with who your top five point guards in the NBA are?
Yeah, so it's a fun time to really make the list. A lot of deep talent I guess, in the point guard position throughout the league, and really narrow it down to five is quite the
It was
challenge.
hard. It was
It
hard.
was, yeah, I went back and forth on quite a lot. But to keep the intro brief, at five, I have John Morant. Four, I have LeBron James. Three, Luka Doncic. Two, Steph Curry. And number one, Chris Paul.
Okay, our lists are pretty different. So I'll get into my top five before we start going through each other's lists in a little more detail. So my top five. At five, I have Steph Curry. At four, I have Chris Paul. At three, I have Luka Doncic. At two, I have John Morant, and at one, I have LeBron James. All right, so
Okay,
let's.
so that looks like the same five.
It's the same five in a varying order. So it's surprising that we have the same five, but we have them ranked differently. So that should be fun to discuss. Or let's see why we rank each guy differently. Let's try to figure that out. So your fifth guy was who?
I had John Morant at five.
Okay, why do you have Ja at five? I think that's way too low. Why do you have him at five?
So I'm open to moving him on the list, obviously, but this is only
No, our
his
lists are
what?
locked. Our lists are locked. You can't move anyone. Why do you
Okay,
have
then
him at
as of
five?
his year to date and career to date stats
Yeah.
and contributions and what he's done in the NBA, I have him at five because he hasn't surpassed the other four guys. Metrics wise, his PER is, I think, the highest on this list, other than LeBron James. His win shares are up there as well. And just on other factors I've been really looking at, assist to turnover ratio is key for me. And he's obviously a great leader on the Memphis Grizzlies squad. But I just think he has elite stats all around. It's translating to winning basketball this year. And yeah, since we made this pretty much mid-season or not necessarily at the end of the season yet, and I haven't seen how the postseason plays out, five I think is a fair spot to put him. Because keep in mind, this is above names like Trae Young, who's taken a team to the Eastern Conference Finals, above James Harden, above Kyrie. So I think five is a fair spot to keep him at.
Okay, so listen, you touched on it. He's got the second highest PER on this list. There's no way you can have a guy who has that level of PER with his win shares per 48 also being the second highest on the list. No, third highest because Chris Paul's the highest, LeBron's second, and Jaw's third. Plus the counting stats, like his points per game. He's I think second or third on this list in points per game. His assist numbers are good for a guard. Remember, he's in his third season, and the Memphis Grizzlies are currently second in the West and second in the NBA. Nobody had them this high on the nobody, no, not a single person could have predicted that. If I told you at the beginning of the season that 80% of the way into the season, Memphis would be the second best team in the NBA, I think I would have been laughed at every single room where I made that comment. And Ja is the reason they're second in the NBA. There's nobody else. That roster, that entire engine, that whole team functions around Ja. So having him as fifth best just doesn't work when he's the main reason the team is winning. His impact metrics are good, his counting stats are good, his percentages are all trending upwards, and he's only in his third season, so it's fair to assume that he will get better as time goes on. And
Yeah,
I
but I'm not making that assumption. This is as of right now locked in.
no, but okay, fine. Even if you want to say as of right now, Memphis is second in the league. There's no downs, there's no negative thing against Ja that can put him when you put him head to head against these guys. There's nothing negative that comes out of that where it's like, oh, he's worse than this player at this and this, but his team's winning. He's great numbers, great impact on winning, great efficiency. Like he's the leader of that Grizzlies team, who's probably set up to be a perennial contender in the NBA as long as they can build the roster and keep the roster that they have around him. Pieces can continue to improve. It's too low. Fifth is too low for me. It's too low.
Well, this is like regular season best point guard of this season. Then yeah, he has a strong case for number one. But like the
Yeah.
four guys I have above him, I trust them with the ball more. And I think, yeah, I don't think it's that hard to say that LeBron, Luca, Steph, and Chris Paul isn't a complete shock to have over John Morant at this moment.
Okay, so that's fair. I think
Like just in contrast, Chris Paul, I think it's more shocking what he did when he was on Oklahoma City than what Jaw's doing now
he had OKC as what, a seventh seed or eighth seed? I can't remember.
as a five.
They were a fifth seed. Oh
Yep.
shit. Okay, so that was impressive too. I think SGA was the second best player on that team, right? Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and
But
OKC
that
had
was
Billy Donovan.
a lottery team prior to that traded for him. Memphis at least made the playoffs last year, so this was the ascent was sort
But,
of seen
okay,
coming.
okay, but Memphis had Jaw last year, so take Jaw off that team, and I don't think Memphis is a playoff team. So okay, you know what? It's
What if
fifth.
you put Luca on the Grizzlies?
Listen, I'm not saying Luca is going to be bad on the Grizzlies, and he can be good, but Luca's efficiency is a problem, and we'll get to that on my list. That's why I have Luca below Jaw. I have him one spot below Jaw on my list, and the sole reason is efficiency. And Dallas is fifth in the West, and Memphis is second. There's got to be some credit being given for winning, and at the end of the day, the objective of the teams is to win games. And Jaw is putting up great numbers, just like Luca is. He's doing it slightly more efficiently than Luca, and Memphis is winning more than Dallas. For that reason, I have to give it to Ja. Now, is it's close. Like I said, they're second and third on my list, but I still have like the Memphis is second in the West and in
Fine,
the NBA.
we can continue with this. I mean,
Yeah, like this is
like
never ending. So the
Donovan
thing is,
Mitchell was clearly one of the best point guards in the league last year on a first place Jazz team, but you know,
no, he's not. Donovan Mitchell's not the best. Rudy Gobert is the most important player on that team. But anyways, okay, let's not get sidetracked. So I had Steph fifth on my list. That's low compared to your. You had him second, right?
yeah, I have him at two.
Okay, so I had Steph at five because by his own metrics, it's a down year, and I'm not using that against him because I think he's held to an insanely high standard. You're talking like best ever type standard. So even though it's a down year for him, his efficiency and his metrics are still amongst the league best. He's playing well. His impact on winning is still there. He's still a hugely positive player for Golden State. Golden State's still winning really well. They're third in the West, third in the NBA, and his style of play, he's really the whole Golden State sort of engine, similar to Ja, runs around Steph. Like Draymond's an important piece, Clay's an important piece, some of their other pieces, Wiggins, Jordan Poole. It's a team effort there, but I mean, you take Steph off that team, and they pretty much have to change the entire way the team is built and functions and what they're trying to do. Steph is sort of like the first point of attack for that team. So I just think compared to the other guys on this list, his season just hasn't been as impressive. He had a really hot start in November, and after that, it's been cold. Like his field goal percentage is not nearly as high as it normally is. His 3 point percentage is one of the lowest of his careers, and while it's still better than almost everybody on this list, no, pretty much everybody on this list, yeah, but it just hasn't been as impressive, and it might be voter fatigue here in the sense that similar to voter fatigue in the sense that we've just expected so much from Steph every single year, and we sort of become accustomed to what he does that him having a down year by his own standards makes it seem like he's not playing as well. But I just think we talked about this in the beginning. The point guard position is so deep. You're really nitpicking here to like create a top five. You're nitpicking like crazy, and you really have to delve into the details. And I just think that Golden State's done well, but they could be doing better. And some of their losses have been a result of Steph's poor shooting. Some of their losses have been a result of Steph's poor play. So I think he could be better, and that's why I have him fifth. But again, I have him fifth in a very deep, extremely talented pool of players. So there's no shame in being fifth. I just don't. I just think the other four guys have been better than him. That's all. That's all it boils down to. He's been better than everybody else in the league except for these four guys. That's just what I think, and it's close. It was tough to have him fifth because I'm a Steph Curry fan, but it hasn't been as good of a year for him as I think he would have hoped, and I think based on what he expects of himself, he could be doing better.
Okay. Yeah. So like even with the top five list, like I don't think it's a slap to really put any of these guys in each spot because like it's surprising that we have the same top five anyways. But I guess the big reason I put him at number two as opposed to five is because his ceiling out of those guys, I think, is the highest when he's absolutely playing well. And we've seen even like last year towards the end of the year when he was going on that tear, like there was MVP chance for him when his team was an 8 or 9 seed at the time. But another reason why I have Steph higher on this list is because he doesn't necessarily have to be the system to be successful, and he can be slotted into any team in the NBA and make it work as like a fit in piece, similar to how they mentioned like Kevin Durant can go anywhere and adjust to any type of play style. He doesn't necessarily have to be the system where he gets the volume or the high usage. Steph also is like that in a sense where he's so versatile. You can put him in any situation and he can succeed in. Plus, he's also has the most lethal shooting on this list by far. And considering that even the metrics state that he's having a really off year and he's shooting at a lower percentage than Russell Westbrook, the fact that he's still like on up there with elite metrics, pretty impressive for what we're considering as one of his worst years in a long time.
That's a good argument, and I don't think I disagree with anything you just said. The only difference for why I have him fifth is we have to rank him like being a good piece anywhere, being versatile in terms of fitting in, not being a system unto themselves. Those are all great sort of characteristics to have as a player, but we're measuring this list based on the current absolutes that we have right now. And so for that reason, or at least when I made my list, that's the criteria I used. I have to take what I know today and what has happened up until today. That's the
No,
criteria I use when
I
making my list.
do I do factor that in as well. Like I'm not saying like that's like a big thing, but I think that's what separates him from almost the rest of this list because like something like Luca or LeBron James, like these guys are the system. They have to have the ball or else there's no way the team succeeds.
I
Because,
agree.
you know, they're not off the ball players. There's only like one way to win with them. Whereas with Steph, like the whole playbook's essentially open.
I agree. And I don't, like I said, I don't disagree with any of that. We're nitpicking here, but I just think Golden State could be doing better if Steph was having a better year by his own standards in terms of shooting, in terms of what he brings to the table, his main skills.
Yeah,
And
but the problem is, I guess they haven't needed him to be better. Like you know, last year there was like a time of need, and all of a sudden he absolutely turned it up at a completely different level. Like now they're pretty much in cruise control.
yeah, no, you know what? We'll have to see what it looks like come the playoff time because the Steph haters will like to say that he's not clutch and he comes up short in big moments and he can't put the ball in the basket. You know, whatever the knock is against Steph in the crunch time and in important games. I don't buy into any of that. I think his numbers are great all around, even in the clutch. But again, I think it just goes back to I think the four guys on this list are doing more for their team. That's what it boils down to. And we could like we
So
could both
that's a dangerous part because I don't necessarily think doing more makes you a better point guard.
well you have to assess the picture in its totality. So I made the argument for Ja where he's winning more. Though look, I would flip I have Chris Paul at 4 only because of how good Phoenix is with Chris Paul. Like though like Steph and Chris Paul could be switched. Like I could put Steph at 4 and Chris Paul at 5 and I'd have no problem with that. So I was nitpicking here, but I put a greater emphasis on winning, and except for like LeBron and Luca who are higher on my list, but that's because they're doing both of their metrics are so crazy that I had no choice but to value them. Like there's I didn't give like a fixed proportion to different things like winning or metrics or whatever, but looking at it in its totality, I just think the other four guys have been better this year. This year,
Okay.
not in their career. I think Steph is great all time, but this year for now, I think the other guys are better. Okay, so who did you have at 4?
I had LeBron James at four.
Okay, why?
Might be a little bit of prisoner of the moment here, just over the last couple games. He's been dropping 50 lately. That's the thing. Like he's able to turn it on when he really needs to, when his team actually needs a win. I know right now he's pretty much stat padding, getting his numbers, but as essentially the point guard on the Lakers, gets everybody involved, gets to the basket at will still, and I think he's a great leader for the team. But like once again, like I wouldn't have him higher than Luca, Steph, or Chris Paul. And the reason why I have him higher than Ja is that I think he plays at a higher IQ level than he does right now still.
Okay, so
Like
so the
nothing too flashy. He's at 4, and it's just hard for me to put a lot of people above him.
okay, so not bad points. I don't necessarily disagree, but I'll tell you why I have LeBron a lot higher than you do. He has Luca level production, although at the best efficiency out of any player in this group. So Luca's production is high volume, low efficiency. LeBron's production is high volume, high efficiency. He has the highest win shares per 48 out of any player on this
Mm-hmm.
list except for Chris Paul, which means the Lakers suck this year. We know that, based at least up until today,
That's
from
the
what we've
biggest
seen,
problem.
they
Yeah.
they suck. So yeah, people are gonna say, well, I'm hypocritical for having LeBron on the list so high if I'm valuing winning. No, because they're not losing because of like if you take LeBron off this roster, this Lakers team is probably a bottom five team in the NBA. And LeBron's only played 48 games. He's been out
Yeah,
for some games.
but
So
he is the system, right?
he is a
The
system. I
whole
agree.
team is set up for him
For
to be the
him.
system. So they should obviously without him, like it's a terrible team. Every team he's been on without him, they're going to be a garbage team.
Yeah. I don't yeah, I agree with that. I agree. But his numbers, his percentages, his impact on winning, his efficiency, he has the highest PER on this list. He's in his 19th season and he's putting up this type of impact stats, the impact metrics. It's just absurd that a guy his age can do what he's doing even amongst the league's great when there's no age criteria. There's nothing like he's still putting up the best
Yeah,
numbers. And
I'm not factoring in age at all to like any of this. It's just
yeah,
yeah,
I
on
agree.
impact.
I agree. It's just a testament to what he's doing, and he's right now he's ranked fourth in the entire NBA in PER, not just amongst guards, not just amongst point guards, amongst every player in the league. I just think the Lakers would be so screwed without LeBron. And yes, part of that is he is a system. But even if you give them Anthony Davis and you give them Russell Westbrook, fully healthy, no issues with AD, he's the primary guy. You take LeBron off that team still sucks. AD's you can't count on AD. Westbrook has his issues, as we know. It's been very well portrayed in the media what his issues are. LeBron is doing everything in his power to carry this poorly built team, having them ninth in the West. And yes, that's a knock on him. I think they could be higher in the West, but he's also been out for games. Like I think on this list, he's played the least amount of he's played the least amount of games out of all the players we have on this list. So had he played more games, and that should be held against him. I agree, it should be held against him because being healthy and being available is part of being a good basketball player, being on any top whatever list.
Hmm.
But the what he's doing for the Lakers team and how efficiently he's doing it, you have to give him his credit. And I still think he's the best point guard in the league right now. That's what I think.
I just kept him at 4 because even with the games he has been in this year, I think he's only one game above 500 for games that he's actually played in versus
That's
what he
fair.
hasn't played in.
That's fair.
And him and Luca to me are pretty much similar points. The only difference is for me is that Dallas's record laps the LA Lakers record, and I don't think Dallas really has that great of a team either.
Okay, that's fair. No, if your reason is they're not winning, I'm not
Like
holding that
that's
against
the
you.
only
That's a
reason
valid reason.
my
That's a
3 and
valid reason.
4 is ranked like that. I could have LeBron at 3, but like the way Dallas is just much better than the Lakers, and I don't know if it's like an X factor thing. Luca has a much higher usage than LeBron does, so he I guess controls more of the flow as he's involved in much more of the plays. But
No, I don't disagree with that. I do think that the only knock on LeBron's argument is that the Lakers suck. It's fair to use that against him because you can't be a top point guard in the NBA and not have your team in the playoffs.
yeah,
So that is a valid argument. I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think he's doing so much for that roster and for that team that I wanted to give him his flowers for what he's been doing this year, and he's just doing it better than everybody else. That's what I thought. But you're right. With the winning thing, I agree, could knock him down to you have him at fourth. So that's fair. I had Chris Paul at fourth, above Steph Curry, and it's going to sound funny, but the reason I have him at fourth is because of his impact on winning, even though I have LeBron at first. Doesn't really make sense, but again, like I said, for LeBron, it was because the numbers were so good. For Chris Paul, his counting stats are mediocre at best. He's a 15 point per game guy. His assist numbers are good. He's got the highest assists on this list. He's averaging almost 11 per game. His efficiency is good, sort of middle of the pack in terms of this group. Lower on the PER rating. His win shares are off the charts, which means
Mm-hmm.
he's pretty much one of the driving factors behind why Phoenix is winning all their games. Again, all the impact metrics, your box plus minus, your value of a replacement player, all these Chris Paul, all these guys are great. Again, we're nitpicking here, but I just think for Chris Paul, it's his counting stats. It's the fact that he's not heavily relied upon to put up huge numbers, and Phoenix can still win. And you could argue that as that's a testament to the other things he brings to the table. Maybe his intangibles, his leadership, his ability to get the team to buy into what the team is trying to do and what the team is trying to achieve. But I think if you want to be in the top in any sort of argument of top whatever list, you got to have the whole package. And for me, his counting stats are what put him at fourth. He's just not. The raw stats are not. It's not enough. The volume is not
Okay.
enough for me to have him high enough on the list. But I have absolutely no qualms against how he's winning and what Phoenix is doing. Phoenix is a legitimate contender for the NBA championship. They're a really good team as long as he's healthy. So if you have him higher on your list, I get it. I totally understand. For me, it's just the counting stats. His stats are too low for me to rank him any higher than the other three guys.
Well, I have him at 1. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I guess I'll get started. So I think on offensive win shares, he's second on this list.
yeah,
Defensive win shares, he's second on this list, and overall win shares, he's first. So his
yeah,
contributions to winning, he's got a track record of it. And even lately, like later in his career, I know his Clippers years weren't that great, but when you went to Houston, that's probably the best Houston team they've had that matched up with the Golden State teams the years Chris Paul was there.
yeah.
And what he did with Oklahoma City, how he carried them from a lottery team to a fifth seed in the playoffs that went to a game 7. So like where he's been going, winning has been following, and now this next stop with Phoenix, he's really been here. I know his PER numbers are low, but the fact that his usage percentage is only 20% compared to everybody else on this list, who's borderline 30, if you look at it, that to me is just insane. And his assist to turnover ratio compared to all these other point guards, he has a 4.5 assist to turnover ratio. The next closest when I was analyzing point guards was surprisingly was DeJounte Murray at 3.6. But out of these top 5 guys, like Ja Morant doesn't even crack 2 assists to turnovers. Same with Luka. Like that has to be a huge factor. Like for pure point guard, like he takes care of the ball well, doesn't really waste any possessions, and he's the leading assist guy in the NBA right now. Translates to winning. He's only used 20%. I don't know how you can say he's not the best point guard in the league. From like every possession he has and he's involved with is like the most efficient you can be.
I'm gonna use an argument you hate, but if the game is on the line, you want your best player taking the shot, right? You
Yeah.
want your best scorer taking the shot. Chris Paul's not your best scorer.
Yeah, I'd give it to Chris Paul. He sent the Spurs home that
No,
one game 7 years ago. He's clutch.
no. I'm not arguing that he's not clutch. I'm saying the guy doesn't put up enough shots and put up enough points to be warranted the benefit of the doubt that if I need a bucket, Chris Paul is the guy I'm going to go to score the ball.
He did
That's
it
one.
against the Clippers last year.
I'm, dude. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm saying he. Okay, let's go down this list. You have
Fine.
five guys on this list. You have LeBron, Ja, Luka, Chris Paul, and Steph Curry. Chris Paul's last on that list in terms of who you'd want to give the ball to if you want a bucket.
That's not true.
Who would you have last on your list? I know who you're gonna say. You're gonna say Ja. You have Ja
He is
lower.
last on my list.
He's not last
I'd
on the
have
list
Luka above Chris Paul. And I'll put LeBron above Chris Paul.
for needing 2 points, or not just a bucket in general. You have
Like the
Steph
team
Curry
getting a
below
bucket. The team getting a bucket.
the team getting a bucket. That's
Okay, I'll
fine.
give the ball to Chris Paul. He can initiate the play.
Fine, but okay. So what I'm saying is, I don't want Chris Paul initiating the play. I want Chris Paul scoring.
He
Like
can score. But see what I
I
mean? If
Yeah,
the
but
ball's
not as
in
good
his
as any of
hands,
these guys. Not as good as any of these other guys. I didn't say he can't score. I'm saying on this list, On this list, the reason I don't have him higher, I don't disagree with anything you said about his impact on winning, his usage, what he does for the team. I agree with all that.
Okay.
His raw stats, his ability to score the basketball, when we're nitpicking for who we
Yeah.
think is our top five, he can't do it as good as the other guys. I don't even know if he can do it great. I just don't trust him to do it as consistently and as great as the other guys on this list. And for that reason, I have him fourth. I still have him higher than Steph Curry, but I think at first, like, if we're talking true PG, like traditional point guard duties, I probably don't disagree with you that he's first. He's the best in the NBA right now, probably over his career. But I think the point guard position has evolved. We ask more of point guards, and his, I want to say lack of, that might not be the best word, but his lower sort of proof of scoring in terms of how much he scores per game, that has to count against him for some. Like he has to be knocked off compared to the other guys. Like LeBron's putting up 30 a game almost. Steph's at 26, Luka's at 28, Jaw's at 28. Like he's not even in the same realm of these guys in terms of scoring the basketball. And that has to be used against
Yeah,
him.
but
That's
there's a degree of stat padding there.
fine, but there's no way we can quantify that. So we have to take those
I
numbers at
mean,
face value.
with even with his counting stats, a fellow Phoenix point guard won a couple of MVPs with similar counting stats.
Okay, but I think we can all agree that okay, historically when we look back at that, we've heard this argument before. When we look back at that, Steve Nash should have never been a two-time MVP. Okay, he
Hindsight's 2020.
it's arguable that he shouldn't even have won one MVP. So Shaq should have won one of those, and I can't remember who should have won the other one, but
I
it's
mean,
debatable that he doesn't deserve either of those. So we can't use that argument
you know
now.
what though? If your only knock on him is just that
It's
towards
just
the end of
scoring.
the
It's
game,
just
who has the
scoring.
ball,
It's
I'm
just
fine with
scoring.
that being an argument against him. I'm just saying the metrics, like the assist to turnover
Oh,
ratio,
those are
the fact that
fantastic.
he is
Yes.
barely even used on a usage percentage level like these guys and still contributing to like all these win shares, I think he laps these guys on these metrics, and that's why I justify him having him at one.
And that, you know what, that's fair. I don't think I don't think you're wrong. I just think we're valuing different things. I think
Yeah,
I'm valuing scoring a little more than you. You're valuing pretty much everything else other than scoring that Chris Paul brings to the table. And you're right, he does like that. The assist to turnover thing is important because if I'm making an argument for end of game scoring, you could argue that, taking care of the ball and not turning it over in the last 5 minutes of the game is just as important to put yourself in a position to win the game. And Chris Paul's better at everybody else than doing that. So I get it. I just, because we're picking from such a talented pool, you have to find criteria to rank people. And for me, my criteria for ranking Chris Paul was that he just can't score as good as these other guys. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. The numbers back that up. But I agree his impact on winning and pretty much everything else he does other than scoring is elite. He's either one or two at every other thing on this list. It's just
okay,
he's so far away in scoring that I had to knock him down.
that's
So
fine.
who do you have at third on your list?
Yeah, I mentioned I had Luca third on my list, and pretty
Okay, I
much
had Luca third as well. So
okay. Yeah, I had
this
him
is gonna be easy.
interchangeable with LeBron for the reasons I said earlier.
Yeah.
What can I say? He's special. He's talented. Carries a bad team. Really has a knack for actually hitting game winners, and he's pretty clutch lately. But and even with his postseason experience, like he's really shown up and showed that he can elevate his game to a new level. So I think he has a very high ceiling on this list. And yeah, I mean third best point guard in the NBA is not that bad.
So I think he's going to be the best player on this list in the future. And you're right, everything you said about him carrying Dallas and what he's doing. The reason I didn't have him higher is because he's a high volume, lower efficiency. I say low efficiency, relatively speaking, in terms of this list. He's still elite efficiency for the NBA, but as a whole. But on this particular list with this group of guys, he's lower compared to these guys, so I couldn't put him up any higher. But what he's doing with that Dallas team, which I think everybody agrees is not that deep and is not that good, to have them, they're fifth in the West, I think, right now. Yeah, they're fifth in the West, seventh in the NBA. That's impressive with that roster, and it's pretty much Luka Ball over there. So I had to have him in my top three. I just ended up having him third. So who do you have second? Oh, you have Steph second.
I had Steph second, yeah, which we
Yeah,
mentioned before. Who do you have at second?
I have Ja second.
Okay, you know what? I'd rather hear why Jaw should be two.
Okay, so we touched on this earlier. Ja's impact metrics are only behind LeBron and Chris Paul on this list, and I had him higher than Chris Paul because of we already talked about why I have Chris Paul fourth in terms of scoring, but Ja is doing at in his third season in the NBA, he's impacting winning at a point guard position that where it's difficult to impact winning. A lot of guards don't have as good of an impact on winning given their size and their physical related restrictions and limitations on a court on a basketball court against guys who are much bigger than them. But Ja is doing that in his third season. His vision is great. His efficiency is good. He's a total package. And he hasn't even I would say he hasn't even come close to hitting his ceiling in terms of how efficient he can be because his I think his 3 point shooting is one of the lower ones on this list. He's shooting it better than everybody. Oh no, he's shooting it better than Luca and Chris Paul, the three ball. Yeah, I don't think he's really. There's no knock against him. And again, his win shares are great, only behind CP and LeBron. His PER is only behind LeBron, and his box plus minus and his four value over replacement player. Again, all his impact metrics outstanding, especially for a guy his age. And then the cake on top is Memphis is second in the NBA and second in the West, only behind Phoenix. And like I said, not a single person. I don't think anybody nowhere had predicted that this deep into the season that Memphis would be second in the West, second in the league, and there's only one person to give credit to for that, and that's Ja. You have to give Ja the credit because he is the engine behind that team. So for those reasons, he's like he sort of checked off all my criteria: winning, yes; impact metrics, yes; good raw numbers, yes. Like there's no sort of even relatively speaking, he did well against these guys in all the categories. So he was kind of like a all around easy choice for being in my top three, my top two really, just because of everything he's done and the fact that Memphis is winning.
Okay, fine. You brought up age a lot. I'm not discounting the fact that he's young or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
Okay.
fair.
And then you also mentioned that it's hard at his size to impact winning. Chris Paul's shorter than he is, so I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, no,
But
I don't disagree with that either.
yeah, the points per game number is really high up there, and the Grizzlies have just been really, really good in the West. Now,
They've
I've
been really
seen
good.
pundits all saying that the East is where it's all at and that the West is not as exciting as a conference right now. But yeah, it's just tough to really rank somebody that high on the point guard list who really has. We haven't seen that much from him in like a postseason setting. You know what I mean? Like if it's just this,
So okay, wait,
that,
wait, wait,
that
wait,
that's
wait,
that's my
wait, wait, wait,
issue
wait.
because I think I already mentioned this. I think the Grizzlies lose the first round of the playoffs.
Okay, stop. Okay, so I knew we were gonna go here when I had John on my list. I knew we were gonna say we haven't seen enough from him in the playoffs. Is it fair to say that we've made this argument on the pod before? We made it last week when we talked about Giannis and Charles Oakley and adapting your game to
Hmm.
any era. That you're adaptable and we give the star players the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
I'm giving Ja the benefit of the doubt that if you're this level elite and this type of talent, you're going to show up in the playoffs.
Okay.
More times than not, the players who are this good, you're talking your LeBron level players, okay, maybe not LeBron, that's pushing it. Your Chris Paul level players, your Steph Curry level players, these type of elite talents, Luca, these guys show up in the playoffs. You have your scenarios like I personally think James Harden folds in the playoffs. Other guys who fold in the playoffs, those are less common than the guys who are star players who do show up in the playoffs. So I agree. We haven't seen Ja show up in the playoffs. I also think that's because he hasn't been given an opportunity. This is his first real year.
He's had an opportunity.
Okay, wait. Yeah, I agree. Last year doesn't count though.
Why?
Because he didn't belong in this category last year. He wasn't the level of player that he is right now last year. So if this was last year, I wouldn't be making this argument. I'm making this argument based on what I know right now. So
Okay.
based on what I know right now, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that come the playoff time, and I made this prediction. I think the Grizzlies are going to at least the Western Conference Finals, and Ja will prove why he's second on this list, why he belongs on this list. So he again, it's the total package with Ja. They're winning, and to say, well, they're in the West, all the pundits are saying the East is where it's at. We got four guys on this list on the West. I
Yeah, I agree with
think
that.
no, this whole list is on the West. LeBron's in the West.
Yep.
Yeah, every single player on this list is in the West. So we can't say, oh, it's a weak Western Conference. So all five guys on this list are in the Western Conference. That argument goes out the window, and he's just been doing everything, and I think he deserves his credit. And they're second in the league right now. It's shocking to me that nobody has Ja on their MVP list right now. I
Oh,
just want to throw
I
that
have him
out
on the
there.
MVP list.
I know you do. I know you do, and I know I do as well. But in terms of like, you go on any media outlet, you listen to anybody talk about the MVP list, it's all Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, and rightfully so. Those guys belong in the conversation too. Don't get me wrong, but there's if winning is a big metric for MVP, which historically it has been, minus the Russell Westbrook year. How Ja is not being talked about more with the numbers he's putting up, his efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. Memphis winning. I don't know. I don't get it, but all the total package, looking at the entire picture, had me put Ja at second. I couldn't put him any lower. I wanted to be objective on my list, and I could not put him any lower.
This is what I said at the beginning. Like, obviously, when you revise the list and see what ends up happening this year, or like going forward, like he can easily shoot up to number one on the list. I don't have a problem with that. But right now, like calling him the best point guard in the NBA is sort of like
Second
calling
best, second best.
sort of like calling Damian Lillard the MVP for winning the bubble MVP. Like he was just the lead in the bubble.
Okay, so I guess your counter to that is it the longevity, or is it we haven't seen enough? Like in terms of the playoffs, and two, we haven't seen Ja
It,
do it
it's
long
it,
enough.
it definitely the playoffs because I just can't call somebody the second best point guard in the league who hasn't done anything other than the regular season.
Fine, that's
Like
fair.
like was
I,
James
I
Harden
don't
the
disagree
best
with
point
that.
guard in the league when he averaged 36 a game?
For the regular season, yeah. For that particular season, yeah. For what he was doing with Houston, it's hard not like.
Would you have called him like number one or two in the league?
I mean, I'd have to go through all the metrics for that season and figure it out. But
Yeah,
James Harden would at least be in my top five for
yeah,
sure. Like you'd have to have him somewhere in that top five. If you don't, you're crazy. Like he was having he that was an elite season. What the stuff he did that year was record book type of stuff, like NBA legend type stuff.
yeah.
So
No, I just wanted to check.
I would have to. I think I would have to, and I can't say yes or no for sure without going through the list. But I would assume that yeah, he would make it on my list based on all the metrics and based on what he was doing just by numbers alone. Like forget winning, just what he was doing by numbers alone was so elite that it would be hard not to have him in my top five.
Yeah.
But and I get your argument for Ja. I get it. If it's showing up in the playoffs and proving that he belongs on this list where all four of these guys,
Well,
Luka's never made it past the first round.
yeah,
So
it's an all around thing. I don't have Trey Young anywhere on this list, right? And he's taken his team to a deep playoff run.
yeah,
Luca's never made it past the first round, but at least like his per game numbers are there. And he, let's be real, he lost to a Clippers team that was arguably the favorite to win the title both those years, barring any injuries, right?
yeah, and so again, I don't have a problem with leaving Ja lower on the
It's
list.
different than losing to the Jazz in five.
Okay, as a second year player, okay, we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole. Ja wasn't what he is today last year, so we'll
No,
have to
that's
wait and
fine.
see in terms of this argument, in terms of the playoff argument. I agree. We'll have to wait and see and find out where it ends up going. But I honestly tried to be objective, and I couldn't have him lower than second. I know, I love Ja. I know I'm a Ja fanboy, but I couldn't have him any lower than second on my list. So you had Chris Paul first on yours.
Yeah, like
I had LeBron first on mine.
okay, why would you have LeBron first?
So we touched on this. The production, the efficiency, carrying that horrible roster, which I agree is if people want to say that this roster is partly LeBron's fault, fine. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I do think he has input on roster decisions. Whether or not he ever openly, publicly admits that or not, he does. Any front office would be crazy not to consult their best player on front office decisions. We know that happens. So yes, he could take some of the blame for it. But just what he's doing, like the two 50-point games this week, that's just sort of a cherry on top. But just overall, his numbers, he's averaging 38 and 6. 30 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Great efficiency. Like easily the best efficiency on this list. The highest PER, the second highest win shares, his box plus minus and VORP. Again, Luca level production at elite efficiency. Luca's the least efficient on this list. LeBron's the same production, if not more production, at the best efficiency. And although the Lakers aren't winning, and that's the only knock on this argument that they're not winning, they would be so screwed without LeBron. They would be so bad that he's right now. It's a carry job. What he's doing with this roster, he's carrying this roster to that ninth seed and hoping that he can get them in. And I think if he played more games, if he didn't get hurt and he didn't miss games, they would be higher up. They would be in the eighth or seventh seed, at least the eighth or seventh seed in the West, even with AD missing all these games. So it's a carry job, and it's done by a guy who's just an unbelievable physical specimen type talent that the league has never seen before, and you have to give him his props. He's just so good.
Oh man, I have to give him his props for leading the Lakers to 10th in the West,
Ninth, they're ninth in the
ninth
West
in the
right now.
West.
Look, the standings is not pretty, but you can't. But it's not his fault. The winning.
This
Look,
is, this is this is the problem. This is the
hold on,
problem.
hold on, hold on,
It's
hold on.
not.
Hold on.
No,
Wait, wait,
no.
wait.
I just want to say one thing. He has a career of being the system. He can't. He's shown he cannot be the system now. Like he needs a lot more help than what he gets credit for, and it's all about LeBron's being elite. It's the rest of the team not pulling their weight. I think there's a little bit more to it than that, where he's not. He doesn't have the same pull where he can single handedly carry a team to the playoffs. And right now, at what 8 games below 500, it's kind of showing.
So I don't disagree with that, and I think it's unfair to ask. I don't think what any of these guys are doing, with the exception of maybe Luca, is carrying a bad team into the playoffs. So if you want to use that argument for Luca, I get it. The
Like
rest of these guys all got
let's
good
just
rosters
say
around them.
Luca, and then even like let's Jokic on Denver. Would they be leading this Lakers roster to a better record?
That's debatable. I don't know if they would. Maybe Jokic would, but I don't know if Luca would. Luca needs just as many possessions and more volume to put up the same numbers that LeBron's putting up. I don't know. That Dallas roster is better than the Lakers roster when AD's out. If take AD out of the picture because he's been hurt, I think we can we both agree that the Lakers would be better if AD wasn't injured? Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take AD out of the picture for a second. That Dallas roster, as is currently constructed, compared to this Lakers roster minus AD, the Dallas roster is better. They have more pieces. They have better complementary players.
Yep.
The Lakers have nobody. So, like, I get it saying that Luca is carrying Dallas. I give him credit for
Yeah.
that.
No, that Dallas roster has like 12 more wins. That's why I'm asking. Like, would it be the same result if you switch both players?
No, well, yeah, for the Lakers, yes. I think Dallas and even for Dallas, yes, it would be the same result. It would. LeBron can do what he's doing on the Lakers on Dallas, and that Dallas team would be just as good. I think if you swap the two out, it's a wash. But I don't think Luca can do what LeBron's doing with the Lakers and carry this bad of a roster to this record the way LeBron's doing it. And that's because one, Luca's in a lot worse shape than LeBron is. LeBron, like I said, LeBron physically is just a machine, and LeBron probably plays better defense than Luca. I don't have the defense stats on here, but Luca doesn't look like he's a good defender. LeBron looks like he's a better defender. He's a better spot defender, I'll say. Like when he wants to be for the couple possessions that he needs to be, he can be a better defender. I don't think Luca
His
can.
defensive Luca's defensive win shares are higher than LeBron's.
Okay, so my argument on defense is probably wrong.
3.7 to 2.3.
But okay, so we'll put it this way: Luca's win shares per 48 minutes are 0.15. The league average is
Mm-hmm.
0.1. So this is your win shares at 0.15 means you contribute 1.5 times what the league average does. LeBron's win shares are 0.19, which is 1.9 times league average. Like LeBron is contributing to winning, the Lakers just suck. We have metrics to measure that, and I think LeBron has a bigger impact on winning than Luca does, which is why for me he's higher on the list. Whether or not the record reflects that, that's more of a statement to the other pieces and roster construction and what's going on with the team, more so than what LeBron is doing or what Luka is doing. I think what LeBron is doing is more impressive than what Luka is doing because the Lakers suck. But LeBron's contribution to winning is higher. LeBron has a higher PER, higher win shares per 48, almost identical box plus minus, and almost identical VORP. And he's doing it on better efficiency. There's no counter to it except that the Lakers aren't winning. But based on the metrics that we have, we know that LeBron's not the one to blame for that. Luka's contributing to winning too, but just not as much as LeBron. It's the Lakers roster that sucks, which is why I didn't hold them being bad against LeBron because he's not the reason why they're not winning. He's doing his part. He's more than doing his part, and the stats show that. That's the only
Okay.
reason I didn't hold losing against LeBron in this particular argument, which is why I have him at number one.
No, that's fair.
That was my take. We nitpicked on this list, like I said. So I have no like. It's hard to say whose list is right or what's. It depends on what you value. Depends on how you want to phrase the argument. And all of these guys, we ironically enough, we had the same five guys. So these five guys, I think we can both agree are just elite at their position, unreal talents. All teams are lucky to have them. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments you want to add on to that as we wrap up this first segment.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of nitpicking, and to be honest, with my list, I really mixed around a lot with 2 to 5, but just on like the Chris Paul thing, like I just thought total metrics across the board. It was just odd to me how far ahead he really stuck up in front of a lot of these people on the list.
Yeah,
And the counting, and it's funny how he does it without the counting stats. Like, he's got the right formula, I guess, for the position.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think if it wasn't for how low his points per game, like he's at 14, I'll say 15 points per game in terms of his raw numbers. If he could get that up to like 19 or 20, I think he moves all the way up to one on my list too. Just because
Yeah,
right now the gap is so large between him and everybody else on this list in scoring that I just couldn't put him higher on the list. But the margins are so thin on this list in terms of, like you said, you had a hard time picking between 2 to 5. This entire list, you could flip flop guys all the way from 1 through 5 on this list and make a very good argument for any one of these guys to be number one or number two on this list. And with margins being that thin, I think if Chris Paul could get his counting stats up in terms of his points per game, all his other counting stats are fine. That could push him all the way to number one on my list. So I don't necessarily disagree with having Chris Paul at number one. I just the points per game were a killer for me.
yeah.
It's just a little